This is the closing panel, and as you can imagine, the reason we went next door was we were agreeing what the questions are, which I'm now going to completely ignore. So, the panel's discussion now is about customer and about creating a desired customer experience. Now, and for the purposes of this panel, we're actually seeing customer as the external customer rather than the internal user from an IT perspective. Increasingly CIOs are being asked to provide insight and start to get involved in the real external customer, whether that's from an application perspective or whether that's from a data perspective, etc. So I'm joined by three panelists who are experts in this field, which is, and I'll let you guys introduce yourself in a second. Each of them has got a different perspective on their companies and what their role as CIOs and IT leaders has around the external customer. So, if we introduce yourselves.
Yeah. So my name's Steve Janu. I'm Global IT Strategy and Transformation Director at Dyson.
I'm Mike Bugembe. I'm not a CIO. I'm a former Chief Analytics Officer for JustGiving. That's the largest online social giving platform.
Benedetto Conversano, Chief Digital and IT Officer at Avon.
And what's interesting is I'm actually a customer of all three of your products. And it's probably easy to explain the JustGiving and the Dyson. Less so around Avon perhaps, but my mum was actually an Avon lady in the good old days. So anyway, so why don't we start with your perspective on whether the role of a CIO has changed in relation to the customer?
Yeah, I guess I can start. So I think from a Dyson perspective, just in terms of those that are not aware, obviously we're a consumer products company. So obviously have a lot of kind of interest around how we get insights around the owners of our technology. We're increasingly moving to a direct business, so selling directly to our owners, and that's mainly through our web channels, our e-commerce channels. So obviously from an IT perspective, that's a critical shift in terms of moving to enabling that the majority of our sales as an organisation. So IT is kind of heavily involved in that. Equally, I think there's a much more of a focus around, we discussed around getting a single view of the customer and understanding our owners around the data and analytics side as well. So with IT responsible for helping to build out the key platforms that bring that insight. So those are the two areas that I definitely see around the role of the CIO and how it is transforming the move to the improved customer experience.
Yeah, and Mike, I guess the digital platform for JustGiving is actually all about technology and IT, isn't it? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though we operate in the for-good space, JustGiving is a fully tech company. I would say the largest percentage of our employees are in the IT or tech departments. And the role that they play is obviously with customers interacting with the platform through digital means, is by making sure the technology is, or the process is smooth and easy, and also provides moments of delight. So ensuring that they enjoy that experience so that they can become regular users of the platform.
So actually, how do you measure moments of delight?
I wonder why I say these things sometimes, because then you then ask. I think if we were to look at moments of delight as, let's say, a leading indicator, the lagging indicator might be whether they come back or not. So you could almost say that, look, if the assumption, in fact, you could even do a full equation around that and say that if they experience a moment of delight, do we get the outcome that we're expecting? So do they come back? Do they donate again, or do they give larger amounts and things like that? So there are ways, if you like, of creating some sort of measure.
Yeah, it's interesting because Anthony and I were at an IT leadership conference for Rolls-Royce last week, and we had an external speaker who came in who actually talked about moments of delight from an Amazon perspective. And what he was talking about was, of course, that Amazon uses those moments of delight to get you to do more. So when you go onto Amazon, you buy something, and the first thing you get is an email from them saying, thank you for your order, which is a moment of delight. I've now ordered something. I've handed my money over, but I still don't have the product, interestingly, but I've got a moment of delight. And then the next moment you get is another email that basically says, your order is now being picked, which gives you another moment of delight, and then your order's now been dispatched and it's on its way. You still handed your money over, you still got no product. You're now into your third or fourth moment of delight with Amazon. and then it's actually out for delivery, and you're still very excited by this thing. And then at that point, of course, it's then delivered, and actually they tell you that. But that's not the last email, of course, they send you. You know, they then turn around and say, did you realise other people just like you have bought the following? And they get you into then back onto the website and back into that cycle of moments of delight. So it's really interesting when you look at organisations that are, you know, real powerhouses of digital retail.
So just to add to that, then the IT and technology as a whole plays a really big role in being able to gain that insight or build that understanding, because those moments of delight, we could either assume them from our own perspective, or we could go through a process of trying to learn that through gathering more data and identifying when exactly these moments are.
And I think it's a fine line between kind of the number of interactions you do and understanding when the right moments are for those interactions, if you like, rather than just bombarding people with 50 emails between.
But it is that kind of constant moments of delight. I think the other thing that's quite interesting about Amazon is you have the moments of delight, but you're encouraged to actually post it onto your Facebook and tell everybody else that you've had a moment of delight because you just bought something as well. So,
well, have you done that?
Posting.
No, I don't do Facebook. I'm of the different generation. So, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm at Avon 6 months, and I have to say it's the best job of my life, because it's the first time that I am in a company that really has to do a true turnaround. So I've been working with for very successful companies like Procter or IKEA, and I was also in food retail, but very successful. And Avon is in trouble. And the little story that I have about the role of the CIO is that actually when I was recruited, they were looking for a CIO, and then they told me that they were looking at the same time for a chief digital officer who was going to be responsible for the customer experience. And I said, what the hell is this? I'm not going to take the CIO job and with someone else who is going to do the customer experience and then saying to someone else what needs to be done. And that's what they did. So they created this new position, which is Chief Digital and IT Officer. And I truly believe that actually one of the reasons why Avon has lost market share and sales big times in the last 10 years is exactly because there was this not enough focus on the customer experience, which for us has two components. Is the final consumer, but then is what we call HER, the representative. We have 6 million representatives worldwide. And everything that we can do on a daily basis to make these people satisfied immediately brings sales. So for example, one of the mistakes that was done and that we have completely reversed in the last month has been, of course, as all the companies, we have a bunch of legacy systems, and the future is always going to be better. We are going to launch this new fantastic solution in 1 year or so. Yeah, but then you have every day 6 million of people that are really suffering for small things that can be improved. And we have been completely changing that the strategy, which is that we need to invest 50% in improving what we have today, every day, every single day. And then, of course, changing everything in a much better experience.
Mm-hmm. So I guess in the audience, I don't know what other people's experiences are, but do you all have CIOs and CDOs? Is that how most organisations are set up? No? So CIO and combined CDO? Is that how most things are now? This is interesting because we did this a year ago, and we asked for the show of hands between the CIO and CDO versus a combined role. And then there was a lot of people put their hands up around having the two roles. Now you're seeing a lot more of that kind of integration that you just described, and Rolls-Royce is exactly the same. We've just gone CDIOs in our businesses, who are responsibility for both the end user experience and also the internal IT elements of it as well.
Can I ask, is the D digital or is it data?
Digital.
Right.
Digital.
Okay, because of course now you have the CDO role, which is Chief Data Officer.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see where that.
Well, we got ourselves confused, to be fair, because we called our what should have been a data CDO, Actually, we called it a digital CDO, and then the business became confused about who do they talk to around IT. And they took digital or the IT guy, and that's kind of where we got in.
But that's actually interesting, because then, for example, in the Avon case, then there was this the data part, which was a little bit of an orphan. So it was almost forgotten in this. So actually, the merge is now of the three part, if they are three, which I think they are not. The digital customer experience, the data, and the classical IT.
Yeah, good. Okay.
All under the same umbrella.
Yeah. So if you look at how your role has changed as a result of the accountability you just talked about, you know, what's one of the key things that you now start to think about that you may not have been doing a couple of years ago?
I think there's a lot more focus around trying to understand those user experiences, definitely, in terms of and working closely with our commercial functions and marketing functions around that. There's obviously the whole piece around data compliance and GDPR in terms of having to start be concerned around PII information and managing that piece as well in terms of those areas. And I think there's a bigger challenge as we move to to looking at consumer-facing solutions around the scalability and the need for providing a platform that is scalable and can cope with. We have quite large peaks in terms of actual sales around certain seasons and things like that, and having to start to think about new parameters around those sorts of things as well that we never were previously not thinking about in terms of how we would engineer our systems. So there are a few things around that, I think, that definitely we're having to worry about more than we were previously.
Yeah, and I guess you were talking about data then. So, you know, from a data perspective, what are you worried about?
So I'll throw a wobbly into the whole thing and say, for us actually, when I was at Just Giving, what we did is we needed somebody who lived and breathed data in order to generate value from that as an asset, right? So rather than it being a component of IT, if you like, it needed to have almost to some extent its own P&L, where it was being treated as this raw material that the organization had built over time that had value and could be used in different parts of the organization and even customer facing. So we did actually separate the role of CIO and Chief Data Officer or Chief Analytics Officer, whichever the ones it is. And on that side, everyone was focused on ensuring the customer experience. The UX teams, the design teams were all part of the IT. But data was really charged with building that most comprehensive understanding of the customer and the user by basically hoovering, data sources from everywhere. Vacuuming, sorry, that's the word, thank you. Data sources from everywhere to build, that really intimate understanding of the customer so that we could, understand all the movements that we could make, whether it was retention that we were after or getting them to make an additional purchase, like in your instance, for example, or move on to understand the journey that they would take in the use of your respective product. So do they buy a vacuum first, then a hairdryer, and so forth? And I suppose you might have the same to some degree in your business, I don't know. No, like Land Rover, for example, I understood were collecting data from bounty data, if you remember, from when children were being born, because then they could predict when you would need a 4x4.
Yeah. Certainly, but the Rolls Royce I work for is the car.
Sorry.
It was a good effort. But actually, I mean, we still have the same needs for the customers, though, which is around how do we exploit data? And we're taking a huge amount of data off of the engine. Then how do we monetize that and sell it back to the airlines? And one of the things we do, for example, is tell the airlines how efficient the pilots are with the fuel that's controlling the engines. Because obviously, fuel is one of the biggest costs that an airline incurs. So if we can make pilots more efficient in the use of fuel, then of course airlines make more profit, and that's a service we can then sell with fuel management capability and that sort of thing, including educating pilots to be a bit more careful. So, what about your experience with Avon?
My experience is that what has really changed with this new concept of this new role is not so much my behavior as an individual, but rather we have been removing organizational silos. When I joined Avon, I had the customer experience guy on my left, the IT guy on my right, and they were talking to me. Bidirectionally, they were not talking to each other, and the data guy was outside the room. And they both said if I had more data or if I had access data, I could do better my job. We have completely reorganized this, and what is in lead is for the different areas of the business, who drives the customer experience. So in a way, it makes the sales representative happy, the final consumer happy, and they lead the entire system development, and they have the analytics guy working for them. So it's really a reorganization of all the way we work that now makes people talk to each other, which is always for me the root cause of all the business inefficiencies, is lack of communication.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's the same at Dyson. The teams work much more closely together in terms of the commercial teams that are kind of owning the kind of more creative side of things than the IT teams, as well as the data teams working in kind of more closer relationship, one team, if you like, across those previous organisation boundaries.
So what do you guys see in your organisations? Do you see that close collaboration now between IT, marketing and the commercial departments? Do you still see barriers and divides? A few nods of heads. I'm not sure what the nods of heads mean. Good question. Interesting.
I think the barriers are breaking down. But I think the responsibility, as well sits with IT to break those barriers down, because I think historically we have been perceived as as the department that blocks innovation and puts controls in. So we've tried with the drive from our global CEO to turn internal IT into a strategic weapon.
Yeah.
So use it as an enabler to drive business growth and to support the business. And I think the breaking down of those silos, I could concur more. You have to business partner the same way a HR business partner does with everybody else. Yeah. You've got to get very aligned to the business strategy and look how you can make a difference, because I think the days when we can just be a break-fix organisation and sit in the background and keep the organisation running are long gone. We've actually got to add value to the business, otherwise there'll be no need for IT. There'll be a zero IT footprint in the future. With software as a service, there'll be some small bits left, I'm sure, but in years to come, I think our roles will be reduced, and it's got to be around that strategic value and understanding the business processes, I think, because it's one thing, I think you've got to go out into the different areas of the business and actually understand how the business runs, because it's a lot easier then to help support, drive, change, innovation, if you actually go out there and do it, whether it's a supply chain, when I ran supply chain and put my jeans on, got in the lorry and went and delivered some goods with our organisation, and that's how you find at the front line exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I think that strategic bit that you talk about is really important. That's certainly something our CEO talks about. So he talks about effectively networks of customers, suppliers and Rolls-Royce, and actually each one of those links that exists in there, actually IT is a real key enabler of making that link, but also where is the strength of that link? Is it actually with the customer because they've got the control, or actually do you put it with yourself? And if you do the right thing with the right digital capability, data, etc., then the strength of that link is with you, which makes it much more difficult for your customer to break the link and go somewhere else, because they're getting value that they just can't get elsewhere. So he sees the IT and that digital and data piece as right at the heart of the Rolls-Royce network of ecosystem of customers, partners, suppliers, etc. And we want to get to a point where we're easier to do business with than our competitors because of that digital capability. So, yeah, I think you've got a point behind.
Well, we're in car parts, and we're a B2B. First and foremost, we do a bit of retail, but first and foremost, we're B2B. We're in car parts. We went heavy into e-commerce in our sector about 2007. Did really well out of that. But the moment we did, we realised that traditional form of selling was being lost, and we were losing perhaps what would be you probably call upsale, and it took us a while to get our heads around the fact that in fact what we needed to do was unify the sales platform, and that in fact what that would mean is that you could collaborate with people in fulfilling their baskets, fulfilling their checkouts, and in doing so they actually got a huge additional traction in the upsale, that we had lost before. But that only came about because of the fact that IT were able to work in conjunction with sales to develop this system that worked seamlessly between both an external facing platform and an internal facing platform.
Yeah.
So if somebody said, well, you know, I would buy that from you, but I need a better price of it, well, before you'd have to go into two separate systems and one wouldn't reflect on the other. Well, now that by having that interim system, almost that middleware, now we're able to actually apply that on the fly, and you know, you've got one happy customer, and you know, hopefully that means they come back for more.
Yeah, I think I talked about it earlier in the opening panel that the CIO role is actually unique almost in its position in the company's ability to see across all the business streams as well as the different supporting functions, etc. And the benefit then comes down to what you just described, which is you could see that two sales platform bit and bringing it together. What about anybody else? Have you got? Sorry, go at the back.
I was going to ask just, I think we might have moved a little bit past it, but it was the point around where does marketing come into this equation when we're talking about the customer experience? We've talked about understanding the business. We all know the technology inside out. We know the value proposition of the CIO being able to see right across the organisation. But how do you draw in marketing into that? Because if you take digital presence, it's superseding a lot of what we would know as traditional IT, it's gone. If we take the different understandings that we have, typically the marketeers will, you would presume, know better than us as the technologists how to define the customer experience. So in everything that, I know Dyson have a phenomenal marketing engine. I have a Dyson customer. Well, not me, my wife actually drove us towards that, you know, because she understood the technology better than me. But my point is, with the marketing engine so powerful, how do you draw in technology and the business and unify that vision or that approach?
Yeah, they're part of those organisational units we talked about. So the marketing teams sitting alongside the IT teams and the data teams was the three teams I was talking about predominantly, right? So the marketing teams knowing the experience that they want to create, what are the moments of delight or the smile moments or whatever that really excite the customers or are the right, and have done the research into all of that, etc., that they can bring that to the table. We can then look at how we seamlessly engineer that in terms of, and how we use data to kind of understand that and kind of evolve that as well in terms of, so it is very much a close relationship. I think there is still some tension between the market team and the extent to which they think they understand the technology, if you like, and step into the technology space, especially with probably third-party technologies and our use of other technologies and channels, right? So be it third-party websites and etc. Right? So how they use those marketplace technologies, for example. And then don't necessarily see the need to engage with IT in some of those areas. But it's then how you make sure that the experience across all of the interactions, no matter what channel you're in, is seamlessly integrated then, right? So there's still some tension there. I'm not going to say it's a seamless team, but it's getting more closely aligned.
Is it on a peer relationship level typically, or did IT lead the project?
It's peer, I think, in terms of, so probably in the last year, I would say it's changed in terms of actually gone to more of a peer-to-peer rather than the marketing teams lead the projects and then IT supports it. I think increasingly that we've stepped up our kind of game a little bit to work more closely with them kind of earlier on, as well as bring some ideas to the table rather than it be a kind of reactive experience. So.
Yeah, I think the role of marketing is changing quite dramatically. I think if you go into, let's say, a large supermarket that has a reward scheme that a lot of people use, the insights you get from what the customers are actually doing through that reward scheme is amazing. But what they're then doing is they're combining that data with external demographic data, which basically talks about the wealth of the population that goes around the store. Then you look at the footfall that goes through the store, and they can monitor with cameras how people move their way through the store. You combine that with temperature and climatic information, and you can predict pretty much accurately what somebody's going to buy and not buy without having to involve marketing at all, who are basically having a bit of a punt at what the next gizmo is going to be. And what's interesting is that all of that happens constantly every day. and they then use that to start influencing the supply chain to make sure that the products are in the right place at the right time in all the stores for the appropriate demographics of where those stores are. And what's now interesting is actually that when they open a store, it's all about the IT and the analysis of the IT department that determines where the store should be opened. Nothing to do with marketing, nothing to do with management. It's all about the data they've captured, combined with demographics, and then that decides whether the store is going to be successful or not, how big the store needs to be. And also they look at categories of store as well. So very few stores actually have every single product, but so they have categories of store, and they'll turn around and say, you know, a D category store will be successful here because people aren't going to pay any more than X for a particular piece of food. And that's kind of where I think, you know, marketing departments are really losing out now.
I think we're also looking at that. We have physical presence. We're starting to open retail stores in Dyson as well. Not many in terms of key cities and places like that. We'll create a kind of it's more of an experiential centre, if you like, a demonstration store rather than a hard retail store. But very much around the kind of the city strategy of saying where best to place those stores. If we're only going to invest in a few of those stores globally, what's the right cities to go into, and how do you then leverage that to kind of drive the through data and analytics the right places you put them. So definitely is similar.
I think that the challenge you're talking about as well is it's a real one, you know. So you can imagine the feeling of a marketer when suddenly their bread and butter, what they've been doing all this time, you've got effectively a machine telling them what's better. You have the additional clash of if you have a user experience team, for example, where do they sit? Do they sit in marketing or do they sit in IT? And if they sit in IT, then you have even more of those clashes. But I liked your suggestion of those sort of multidisciplinary teams, which is something that we did do at Just Giving as well, where we had almost like within each project team, we had a sort of like a mini leadership team, which was made up of three individuals, each from each discipline. So one from tech, one from marketing, and one from data. And together, they had the responsibility of making the calls of what would happen by using the experiences that they each have blessed with. So the technical team would come with, you know, how to design the software, for example, especially with the UX input as well. The analytics team would come in with some of the insight that they've had, which says that this is what you should do. The marketing team also still understands people perhaps better than any of the other two components over there, so has that domain expertise to be able to add their flavor onto that. It took a while to make sure that those three understood they were on the same team, but when they did, it was bringing the best of each of their skills in play to be able to deliver the right solutions.
Yeah, and I guess the marketing team representing the customer in
That's
that almost, right? In terms of, so they're the voice of the customer in that conversation. So.
At Avon, the collaboration is excellent because the marketing is really focusing on the product. So that is really where they are adding the value, and they have understood that there is an expertise in terms of understanding the customer behavior and how to upgrade the range of product and the assortment to be relevant from campaign to campaign, because we are in this cycle of the brochure, the campaign. And this is really where they are focusing. And actually, the redesign of our product assortment is one of the key components of our strategy over turnaround. So for them, it's like, what's the product that is going to be in the new, in the next innovation pipeline, the next commercial cycle, at what price? This is where they focus.
Good. So we've got any other questions for the panel?
Can I just change the customer around and turn the customer into the internal customer and ask the panel what they feel are the major initiatives that they're looking to do to improve our internal customers' experience rather than the traditional customers buying from us?
Yeah. So one of our, alongside of this kind of owner experience piece and the customer experience piece, we talk a lot about people engagement and making and the people experience as well. So we have a separate but complementary strategy around how do we improve the people experience, be that through the equipment we give them, the collaboration tools we give them, all of the different systems they have to interact with day in, day out in terms of the digital workplace, if you like. So there are a variety of projects that we're starting to look at. I don't think interestingly, we haven't, and we should look at the parallels around user experience, for example, and those sorts of things into the internal systems. I still think that's lagging in terms of the way we approach our internal business applications, if you like, and thinking about that, how you make the moments of delight from an internal perspective. We haven't gone so far as that, but it's definitely, we're starting to very much see parallels in the two of them. I think there's more to be done though, in terms of really learn from what we were doing on the owner experience space and apply it internally to how we design our applications in terms of that user experience, or the processes we provide, the services we provide as an IT organisation as well, right? So be it as a new joiner, that kind of induction process, how you're onboarded to a company, those are really important moments, and how you understand what those really important moments are as an employee, and really leverage that from an IT perspective. There's so many parallels, but I don't think I think it's still an immature area for us.
Yeah. And do you guys use personas at all in helping to understand it?
But yeah, in terms of...
Well, at Avon, I've chosen the strategy that I'm not going to make everybody happy. Otherwise, I would rather sell ice cream on the beach. So the focus on improving the customer experience, let's say, start and ends with really the commercial part. So the consumer, the sales representative, and these are outside Avon. And then there is a layer which is inside Avon, which we call the sales leaders, that are the people that manage the external representative. And that is where I draw my line in terms of who do I have to make happy from the customer perspective. And it's only a matter of really strategy interpreted as choice of here and now. Because 2019 is the year where finally the sales have to stop bleeding and start, let's say, growing versus the previous years, which has been not the trend in the last 10 years. So full energy, resources, money, people on these 3 layers of persona.
We took a sort of like a hub and spoke model attempt. It was an experiment, if I remember correctly, where we basically allowed parts of the technical team to literally go and belong to another team and go native, if you like, feel their pain, feel the things that makes life easier, rather than be remote. Because when they were remote in a purely centralized team, we found that they were very consultative, right? So you came with your requirements or the things you had or the needs that you had, let's say, as an internal customer. And either you filled in a spec or something. It was a very consultative arrangement. Whereas when they went native, it became really personal, and they found not necessarily shortcuts, but they found more effective ways of delivering some of the things they did because they felt the same pain. It does backfire a little bit because sometimes they go too far native and then they forget that they're still part of the full technical team, and so all the policies that you have in place. So I wonder if it's a balancing effect, but we definitely did see a change when they went fully native. There was a difference in their approach to doing things. It became far less consultative.
And if I can ask a question back, so is there anything you're doing specifically around end user experience that you'd share with us?
I think it's generally user education is key, making sure people know what tools, because we give them fantastic tools, but then we never train them on how to use it. So we give them, we use Microsoft Office tools and things, but we never really go out there and train people on how to use them, just accept that they should know how to use them and let them get on with it. And I feel we invest a lot of money in that area, but we don't really follow through with some basic training. So I like the idea of going native, so to speak, and embedding people into those teams so they can help them with some of the simple things. It's turning reactive support into proactive support, and I think that's the goal for me internally, really, is to try to have my team to nail those business as usual problems and then turn it around so they can go out there and start to be proactive and get into the workplace and help people to improve their processes, improve their life, and make them happier and give them the knowledge on how to use those tools. So that's the goal.
I mean, certainly, I was going to say, I mean, we have a user experience person in the IT function whose job it is to think about how we deliver better tools for the users, but we also have super users that are embedded in the business to do the point you're saying, which is actually how do we get the best out of the Office products or SAP or PLM and that sort of thing. But we also do other things like tech bars, where you're proactively going out onto a site and working with the users, having a very visible presence, and those things go down incredibly well. Much better than, of course, phoning the service desk or going for self-service and field agents dropping out when they're ready, etc., etc. So, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was just reflecting on why I think that people experience peace is not as kind of progressed as the Xeona experience place in our world, and I think it comes back to that cross-functional team. Actually, we don't have an equivalent partner in our people or comms function that's willing to stand up and work with us, if you like, and be the voice of the employee almost to the voice of the customer that we're getting from marketing. So the HR and comms team haven't necessarily stepped up and have thought about that being an important point in terms of how our systems and how people use the systems as a key thing around the employee experience, if you like, in our company. I think that's something that needs to mature for us to really kind of drive that strategy going forward. So we can definitely use super users and things like that, but actually how do we get that kind of more of a focus within the organisation around how important our systems are for our employee experience? And how far up the agenda that goes in terms of actually employee retention and all those sorts of things as to why people are not sticking with us, if you like, if it's systems that are causing frustration. So I don't think we've got that maturity yet. So.
Yeah. I think you mentioned about the joiners process. For me, actually, that's a critical process from an IT delivery perspective, because it's the thing that shapes people's perception of the IT department before they've actually joined the organisation. If it's slick and they arrive and the PC's there, the mobile phone's there, all the accounts work, etc., they'll think, okay, that was pretty good. Unfortunately, we don't always nail that. No. Therefore, you instantly got somebody who thinks the IT department can't get a PC, a network.
Slow,
and what's interesting is you look at the root cause of that, it's not always IT's fault either. HR forgot to tell you they were recruiting 1,000 graduates and that sort of thing. So, but luckily it's Anthony's fault.
Add something to a point you raised. Sorry, I'm going back.
No, that's okay.
You said something along the lines of you've invested in quite a bit of the tech that's just never being used. Yeah. So there's a behavioral scientist called BJ Fogg in the US, in the West Coast, and he came up with an equation for technology for behavioral change, where B is behavior, equals MAT, which is motivation, ability, and trigger. And when you break it down, it's actually really simple. So in the trigger bit is, do you even communicate with the rest of the teams? Do you tell them what they've got? So the training bit that you were talking about. Ability, do you make it easy and simple to use? Often we don't, to be honest. We build for ourselves. And when you're building for someone else, you have to find it's completely different, right? And motivation, which was working with the leadership team to make sure that this is, at least across the organization, saying that this is something that we want people to do, and there is some sort of motivation for doing it, if you know what I mean. So rather than motivation for doing something else. So and took that literally and tried it. So we did it with some of our teams, where we then started doing lots of lunch and learns off-site, because we realized we weren't even telling them some of the things that they could do. So that was the trigger bit. And then ability, through those conversations, we found that we had overcomplicated a lot of some of the things that were being offered, and we could significantly simplify them. Even some of the insights, instead of a chart, it just became a line of text that appeared in their inbox, because they didn't want to have to interpret the chart. And so that made it way more usable than the chart, and things like that. Right.
Good. Okay. Well, we're coming up to the end of the panel, so there's a chance for one more killer question from the audience. Is there anything that anybody would like to ask? Oh, yes, volunteer.
Hi. A lot of customer experience is a function of imponderable things like brand and so forth. I'm just wondering how the areas in which you work, how you can apply technology to influence people's perception of the brand.
Well, the quality of IT, I guess, is directly on Thanksgiving, on the Giving website. Sorry, so I was just saying about the Just Giving website is totally dependent on the IT. If it works and performs, it's quick and easy to use, then people will come back. and think that the brand is great. If it's really slow and there's too many clicks and that sort of thing, then they'll move on to a different charity site.
I think particularly in this day and age where the consumer is much more impatient than they were in the past, and they also have choice. So if the process isn't smooth or easy or one of those things, yes, then definitely there's a good chance of but I think brand has even more than that. I think For Just Giving, potentially one of the things was they're quite pervasive because they were first too. Often when some people use a competitor's platform, it's still referred to as their Just Giving page, a bit like your situation.
Yeah.
You know, so I think brand is for me at least, a much wider piece. Definitely tech plays a big part, because if they have a poor experience, it says a lot about your brand. If it's messy, if it's not neat, there's a lot of connotations that can be taken from there. But I do believe that brand is a bit wider than that.
I think it also depends what type of industry you are in, because if you are a consumer product, you can help the brand, but in the end of the day, the major part will be in the experience with the product. If I use an Avon cream, or if I use whatever other computer, or whatever that is. If you are a service organization, then I think you can have much better. Then in the end, probably, especially today, the service can be delivered almost entirely digitally, so you can have a much better influence.
Good. Okay. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but it was a tricky question to finish the panel with. I mean, certainly from a... No, that's true. I mean, from Rolls-Royce's perspective, actually, I was just trying to think through what I would have answered. We actually have a brand, R2 Data Labs, and it's the only other brand that Rolls-Royce uses. Everything else we brand as the Rolls-Royce Group. And actually that's all about data analytics, data innovation, providing data insights, etc. And IT is right at the heart of that brand. So you can actually, if you get it right, actually even an organisation like Rolls-Royce that is really protective of its brand, actually find that you can create a complementary brand that actually brings in you additional revenue and that sort of thing. So I think that's hopefully. Yeah, great. Thank God for that. It's tough down here, I can tell you, sometimes trying to understand the question and that sort of thing. And I think these guys have done a brilliant job of taking on the mantle of customer from a CIO perspective. So well done, guys, and a round of applause.